Welcome to the Real Life Buyer podcast. In this podcast, you will hear interviews with business owners, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, authors, and technical specialists in their field. These professionals will hasten your development, accelerate your career, and broaden your business know-how. Now, introducing your host, Dave Barr, interviewing with a purchasing twist.
Hello and welcome to the Real Life Buyer. In this episode, my guest Mitchell Levy and I are going to discuss the importance and path to increasing credibility in your business and personal life. Mitchell has lived an incredible career. His experience in C-suite management, networking, marketing, public speaking, interviewing, entrepreneurship, and thought leadership is vast. He is a prolific author with an incredible 65 books to his name and is if not the leading authority on credibility. So if you're looking to take your personal and professional growth to the next level and learn from a man whose purpose is to empower individuals and businesses to establish and enhance their credibility in a way that aligns with their values and vision for the future, stay tuned. So without further ado, I welcome Mitchell onto the podcast. Hi, Mitchell.
Dave, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so glad we were recording that intro. I'm going to have to play it again. It made me smile. So thank you so much.
No, credit where credit's due. It is an incredible CV, as we would refer to it, or resume. So I wish I had half of that to my name. So congratulations on an incredible lifetime so far.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a fun journey.
I certainly hope so.
It continues. Yeah.
Well, let's find some more about this journey. Yes, I personally can't recall having seen anyone with a career history as substantial as yourself. Perhaps you could strip back some of the layers and tell us in a kind of a whistle-stop tour way about your career and explain the driving force behind your passion for credibility.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I've been in Silicon Valley for 37 years, happily married for 35, have a 26-year-old son. I've created 20 odd businesses here. And I'll give you a quick snapshot. Now, these are things that sort of added to your comment on CV, but I'm just going to say these are things. And then I'll talk about what really is credibility and how that came about. So I've sat on the board of a public firm for 9 years. I've as a book publisher, one of the sets of companies we've published over 750 books. I've run 4 CEO networking groups. I've run conferences for major conference companies. I have created 4 different executive business programs for local universities. And then I've been asked to join in 2021, the Marshall Goldsmith's executive coaching organization. So that's the 100 coaches. And that is sort of gives me the opportunity to talk to some of the best humans on the planet who I can now call peers and learn and grow with. And that's all fun and that's all stuff, right? So what I think if I'm going to summarize, life is never about being static. Life is about learning and growing and pivoting. And I've pivoted at least 4 or 5 different times in my career. I'm in one right now, right? Because if you're not, then maybe you're stale and you need something different, right? So the pivot that I was thinking about is running a book publishing company. What happens as technology continues to jump into everything we do, what happens in a particular vertical, it becomes democratized. So, by the way, I'm going to throw stuff out. We could come back or not come. Thought leadership is now democratized. Book publishing is now democratized, right? And so what happens when something becomes democratized is the downside is a new business model enters the fray. And it's really hard to compete against a new business model. I'm going to tell you what it is. It's 6 letters. 2 syllables. The new business model is called stupid. And it's so some professional who's doing it as a hobby, who's created a stupid business model that will never actually succeed. And a good example of a stupid set of business models was the dot-com days, where the dot-com days was the business model was we're losing money on every transaction, we'll make it up in volume, which very few companies, Amazon would be one of them, was able to pull that off. Right. So the thing that's interesting is at that time frame, I realized that I needed to figure out what's next. And in 2019, I sat down and I go, what is it that having published 750 books, what is it that my authors are looking for? And the answer just popped in my head is credibility. So then I looked at the definition of credibility in the dictionary, which was, it was the quality in which one is trusted. And I thought, that doesn't feel right. And then the next morning I woke up and what popped in my head was the book Think and Grow Rich and Napoleon Hill. And I thought Napoleon Hill interviewed 500 millionaires and came up with Think and Grow Rich. If Mitchell Levy interviewed 500 thought leaders on credibility, I'd know what credibility means. And so between 2019 and 2020, I went on that journey. And that is what provided the fossil fuel, if I put it that way, for the journey I'm on at the moment.
Wow, it's quite incredible. 750 published books. That's quite immense. I know a few people who have written books, and I certainly have seen that once they published a book they've authored themselves, then they naturally gain credibility with those around them. To have authored so many books and been involved in the publishing of so many books is quite a tremendous feat. And I've got to ask, how on earth did you manage to do all of that in such a short period of time when everything else you've done, it says to people, these are like 10 lifetimes worth of work in one big chunk. How do you manage to manage your time so effectively to be able to do that?
It's really interesting. There are so many people I meet who are single-threaded, right? They do one thing and they only do one thing, and they're 100. And I have had times in my life where I ended up working like 18-hour days for a 6-month period, and I did that one thing, right? Now, the type of existence I have at the moment is theoretically, imagine it's almost like that with a caveat. And that is, I'll work on that one thing until I get to the point where it's in production, right? And so I've put in workflow documents. I've made it very simple, typically using Google Docs. I create workflow documents on I'll do the process at least one, maybe up to 5 different times. And then I'll create a process. And for me, I want to move on to what's next. So then I'll bring somebody in, typically VAs from the Philippines. I'll bring somebody in, put them on the team, and work with them while they actually put the process in place and actually deliver on that process so I could move forward. So when there's so many things I'm doing on an ongoing basis. So for instance, right now, I still run the book publishing companies, but because book publishing has been democratized, I'm only involved at the beginning, sometimes little touch points in the middle and at the end. All the stuff that happens in the middle we have workflow documents, and I have a team member who I've been working with for 14 years. She carries that process along. And so for me, it's still that one thing I'm focused on, but it's that one thing I'm focused on that I'm building. Everything else is in maintenance mode. And once it's in maintenance mode, I'm around for questions, but somebody else is driving. And so that's where how you do a lot. You do something, you do it to the point that you like it, it works, you productionalize it, and then you move on to the next while you've put into place a resource that will keep what you've done in the past moving forward.
Right. So, as you say, a single focused, certainly not the multitasking life a lot of us lead today because it's very ineffective. You've got some key people in place. You focus on systems, procedures, processes to streamline things. Would that be a very quick, fair summary?
It is. But the thing, for an outside person, if you now look at my calendar, I will end up somewhere between 10 to 15 meetings a day. Now, for some people, that's draining. For me, that adds value. Now, Mondays are days where it's a little bit more consultative meetings. So it's the type of clients I'm working with who I'm actually putting processes in place with them for them to change their lives. Fridays are executive coaching meetings. So those different style, corporate level individuals, different processes in place. And then Tuesday through Thursdays is kind of mixed, right? I do a lot of business development type meetings, a lot of partnership meetings. And so what's fascinating is you might say, well, that's multitasking. Technically, yes. It's just I might take off my hat and put on a different one every day.
Indeed. That's really interesting. I quite like the idea that you've got a kind of mindset going on for a day and a particular theme. And so you may be having conversations with different people, but they're similar in some respects. You know, your train of thought perhaps is in a particular flow. I don't know if that's a very good way of putting it, but that's what jumps into my head.
You need something, you need pattern interrupts, even if it's two different things in the same day. What you need to be able to do is be able to hit the reset button. And we just don't, if you consciously think about it, I'll bet you everyone who's listening right now and watching, you can do that. But you have to consciously, when you're moving from one thing to the next, you need to figure out what it takes for you to stop. What is that thing it could even be as little as a 5-second meditation, if that's going to work for you. I actually have a great model for that. And the thing that's interesting, if you can do that and then reset and restart, it's helpful. And so that, as a matter of fact, you got to experience that today, where I actually had to do something else and then get reset back into who I am, right now, you and I interacting.
Yeah, brilliant. We're talking about pivotal moments, and I suspect you've got certain moments in your career where you've had an opportunity that's arisen, you've grasped it, and you've suddenly been able to leverage that moment to give you an increase in credibility, perhaps a dramatic increase. I'd love to hear if there's a particular moment you would say that you could recall now, that what was that pivotal moment and how did it upscale your credibility? And equally conversely, have you ever experienced a moment that actually for you felt like it downgraded your credibility? And if so, what did you do about it to bring it back?
Yeah. Okay, I got 3 moments. We'll do the first one. When it's been a while so this moment is going back a really long time, but it's because of how you asked the question. It's the one that popped into my head. I left the corporate space in 1997. So this goes even before then. And it was when I was working at a company, it was the Amazon today back then was the Sun Microsystems, right? So I was working for Sun Microsystems, and they had, the marketing people had spent $25,000 to be part of a nonprofit group that was basically focused on the proliferation of the internet into business, which is exactly what Sun was talking about. But from a marketing perspective, the marketers were not active in the group itself. I was, because I wanted to extend my network. And so what I ended up doing is I had a mentor talk to me about what do I do? How do I move forward? And where do I want to go in life? And he painted a path for me that, Mitchell, you need to extend your network. That network needs to be with people outside of Sun Microsystems. When the right opportunity pops along, you should say yes. And so as busy as I was working at corporate, this nonprofit was an opportunity for me to be in a legitimate role to meet other people. And so nobody paid me for that. I didn't have to pay the $25,000 a year fee to join because Sun had already done that, but nobody paid me. And in the nonprofit, when I was asked to do more, so they had asked me, hey, do I want to be the spokesperson for Sun because nobody else was around? I'm like, okay. They said, hey, would you like to run a conference and be part of our Comdex conference? I'm like, okay. So I ended up running the marketing side of the Comdex conference. And at the time, this was 1996, I had asked this up and coming company that just got Series B. I asked the CEO if he wanted to speak. He said yes. And I got some one-on-one time with Jeff Bezos. And that was really interesting, right? And then probably the most relevant in terms of how that turned into opportunity. So here it was, corporate job, not getting paid to be part of a nonprofit. Like, of course. I mean, didn't even think twice about that. It just felt like the right thing to do. Comdex and some of the best marketing companies in the world, they did a survey. AC Nielsen did a survey with Comdex, and I'm sorry, with sorry, not Comdex. AC Nielsen did a survey with this company, and they came up with the fact that there were 50 million users using the internet. And that was when the internet was officially real. And they published the survey results, and lots of the media they heard about it, and then they wanted to talk to companies, and Sun was the company of the time, and I was the official spokesperson. Next thing I know, my face, my name, I was on interviews and papers around the world. And it just happened. It happened because they were doing the right thing, and I just happened to be there. And you could say I set it up by doing things outside. Quick, fast story. Within a year, things were getting too heavy. That's when 1997 is when I left Sun and started my e-commerce consulting company, because the dot-com days were in full steam and I couldn't say no.
Wow. That's quite an incredible little story there. And it'd be interesting to see if Jeff Bezos today is the same Jeff Bezos you spoke to those years ago. Do you think he would have changed much, or do you think, he's the same person as he always was, just with a few more bucks?
It's interesting. Hard to say. I mean, because the who we get to see as a personality out there is not necessarily who they really are. So a lot of Jeff Bezos today is we got to see his relationship, his extramarital relationship, and that obviously doesn't bode well for many people who look at him. I would say fundamentally, he's probably very similar to who he was. I don't know who he is today, but at the time, Amazon had just focused on books. And so I actually asked the question. I was sitting outside before the speaking thing. I said, "Hey, are you ready to go? Can I chat?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I love the company." And so we sat down, and I go, "Why books?" And the best insight I could say about who he was, he goes, "Mitchell, books don't matter." He goes, "I needed a vertical that had so much problems that I needed to fix it. Now, here's what I'm going to do different than everyone else. As we fix the problems in the book industry, we're going to create solutions. I'm going to take those solutions, I'm going to sell it to the marketplace." So he was talking about all the things that they've done before they extended beyond books to other things. They were talking about other things that were going to come out of the solution set that they built. And so I think he's a problem solver. And so problem solvers are almost always problem solvers.
Brilliant. Now, the second part of my question is that sometimes we make mistakes, and sometimes you feel you've lost some credibility because of an error either you or a company you work for has made. What's the best way have you found to correct that mistake, to regain that credibility that you feel may have been lost? Is there any techniques you can suggest?
So it's a slightly different question. So I'll tell you the answer to the previous question the follow-on question is, have there times you've lost credibility? And let me say twice in my career where I was actually in a vertical and the business went away, right? So the good news about 97 and starting my own consulting business is it was focused on e-commerce, and that was the dot-com days. Bad news is the dot-com days came to an end, and my business almost went to zero overnight. Same thing happened when COVID happened. My book publishing business, most of the ongoing revenues came from book sales when speakers were going and talking at events. And all of a sudden, when travel went to zero and the speakers were not going to the companies, all of a sudden my revenue went to almost zero. So when it is very easy in this particular case, we'll go back to the e-commerce or even the book business, it's very easy to say, hey, this is my life, and my life has gone to zero, or my business went to zero, so my life is now zero. That's a mindset change or mindset thing that most people unfortunately take the wrong approach. The answer is, well, it's not me, right? What I realized early on in my career that there was nothing I could have done that could have stopped the dot-com days. Even if maybe I could could have done something to prolong it for a day or a week, right? Even if that was possible, it doesn't matter. Can't stop the inevitable. Question is, what do you do next? What's the opportunity? What comes next? What's the focus? That's when it goes back to your original question. That's when the pivot comes in, right? Now, to answer your specific question about, has there been a time where I've personally lost credibility and how to rebuild it? And I don't know if there's one for me, but I've coached thousands of clients. And so what I'm going to say is, sometimes people do things where the proverbial foot goes in their mouth, or the proverbial action goes in their mouth, in their activity, or their great examples are, these are very simple examples where they don't show up online. They don't show up as well as how they show up in person, and their online presence actually hurts them, right? So the answer is, and this is not what we've been taught. The answer is to be credible. Part of being credible is to recognize the importance of being trusted, known, and liked. And part of being trusted is there are four elements in being trusted: vulnerability, external integrity, authenticity, and coachability. And so one of the most important things that if you're called on something and you really have done it wrong, and you recognize you've done it wrong, those around you are telling you you've done it wrong, the most important thing in terms of being trusted is accept it. And to recognize right away, yeah, you know what? I have made a mistake. So showing vulnerability. Then authentically going, I want to fix this. Would you mind working with me? Or can I, do I need to go outside, or can I work with you to try to fix this? Because this is not in alignment with my integrity, who I say I am, right? And so I'm ready to be coached. Whether it's from your manager or peers or those around you, right? And then the most important thing is, and this is where leaders make big mistakes, and these are harder to come back from. And that is those leaders who have been taught command and control, and there are four elements associated with being trusted. There are four elements associated with being known. And the only element, when I looked at the 10 values of credibility, the only element that was the value that was there twice was integrity. Under being trusted, it's your external integrity. Under being known, it's your internal integrity. So a big mistake for those people who have been taught command and control is those people who still believe that the concept of do as I say, not as I do. Whether you're a parent or whether you are a leader, you need to echo the values and be the person you want other people to be. And so it's very easy to lose credibility if your internal integrity has misalignment with your external integrity. You're saying stuff, but you don't believe that yourself. That particular loss is really hard to fix within the same environment. It's not impossible, but it'll take a long period of time. For most people, is to build it up a little bit with the environment you're at, and then go somewhere else. Because the biggest problem we have as humans is when we create this environment around us, people will force us into doing what they think we are. And it's very hard for most people not to jump into and fall into the marketing cookie cutter stuff that has been applied generically or specifically applied to us. And so starting with those around you and getting yourself on the path and then moving somewhere else is the best way when I start looking at the consolidated set of solutions that I've worked with people on.
Brilliant. That's great. Thanks for that. And you mentioned something I perhaps refer to as personal brand. It's not something I'd heard of 20, 30 years ago. I'm well into my 50s now, and what's all this personal brand stuff? But now there are so many people with the advent of social media who are focused on their personal brand. So you've obviously put out an incredible amount of content into the market. What would you suggest for somebody who perhaps are starting out in life or want to not only take their personal brand somewhere, but perhaps their first business somewhere? What would you suggest to them would be great ways to enhance their visibility You mentioned establish trust and therefore gain credibility with the target audience they're seeking.
The most important thing that anyone can do, and I'm going to say these words, and then I'm going to say, and unfortunately, based on interviewing 500 thought leaders, 98% don't do, is to get clarity. Because with clarity, and I'll tell you exactly what that means, it becomes very easy to what to focus on. Without clarity, you're going to follow everyone else's marketing cookie cutter approach, right? So for me, when I'm speaking about the life you want to live, if you are a credible human, you are of service to others, right? So I think that whether you call it servant leadership or whatever you want to call it, if you are a credible human, you are of service to others. And by the way, you have to be of service to yourself before you can be of service to others. So I'm not going to say, you're selfish, right? And the question of clarity, and this is and I'm going to give you the secret formula here. The question of clarity is a concept I've created an acronym called CPOP, your customer point of possibilities. And so what I'd like everyone who's listening to be able to do is in less than 10 words, answer two questions. First question is, who do you serve? So in 1, 2, or 3 words, how narrow can you actually specify the audience you serve? And then the second part of that, or the second question is, from their perspective, not your perspective, from their perspective, what is the pain point or what is the pleasure point they want to address? Because if you can now walk through life with a CPOP, something that's less than 10 words, that level of clarity will allow you to articulate and understand who is the audience. Who is the audience I need to reach directly? Who is the audience that there are influencers that can help me reach that audience? Who's the audience that there are referral partners that will help me reach that audience? For instance, as for me, as a executive coach that specifically focuses on executive gravitas, I went to over the holidays. I went to a basketball game with somebody who has a son who is a high-level exec at one of the fastest growing companies on the planet. And as I'm talking to him, he goes, "Oh my goodness, Mitchell, I need to introduce you to my son." And I can't guarantee anything, but he needs to know about you because as he's growing, he's going to want the people on his team to also maintain executive gravitas. That's an example of, I didn't ask, by the way, that's an example of just living your life and being you and being narrow enough in terms of your focus. I don't need from executive gravitas. Let me tell you something. My CPOP is Inc. 5,000 CEOs leading the future with executive gravitas. Now, 9 words. For the CEOs I'm working with, leading the future would be the thing that I could potentially take out, but I can't because they really do need to lead the future. So it's Inc. 5,000. So the fastest growing CEOs on the planet, Inc. 5,000 CEOs leading the future with executive gravitas. In the first 5 times, as I was trying to figure out if this is really me, in the first 5 times I shared it, one of the people said to me, I think this was number 3, he goes, "Mitchell, why are you limiting your audience to 5,000 people?" And Dave, I'm like, all I could say is thank you. You've cemented the fact that this is absolutely the right thing for me. I mean, first of all, if 5,000 CEOs said yes immediately, I couldn't service that. At least not today, not with the company I have at the moment. And that's what we're afraid of. We've been taught that bigger is better. We've been taught that we need to create an audience that is so big that even a teeny piece of it would work. And I'm going to say the broader you are, the harder it is for people to want to recommend you, the harder it is for people to refer you. The more narrow you could focus, the more clear you can have on who you serve and what they are addressing, what they're dealing with, either the pleasure point they want to reach or the pain point they're addressing, the easier it is for you to be credible. So how do you go about creating a personal brand where you focus on an area that's important to those people you serve? And if you can actually articulate the audience you serve, now you know what to write on and what to focus on. And earlier in the podcast, I talked about the fact that thought leadership is now ubiquitous. With ChatGPT, anyone who wants to could write any article they want and any topic. You just have to ask the right question. So the more narrow you could be on the topics you serve, the easier it is for people to remember you. And what you need to do is absolutely use AI to help you with the initial writing, and then go in and add your own spin to it.
Yeah. It's interesting talking about network, because for me, a lot of people will judge others on the company they keep, the network that they have around them. Do you think it's important that oneself should actively review your network and your associations on a regular basis, and even disconnect with those you feel that perhaps negatively now impact on how others would view you?
Give me an example, Dave, if you don't mind, just so I could get real clarity on this. What do you
Yeah.
mean by somebody on your network that is negatively viewed? Can you give me an example of that?
Well, I'm thinking of is that once you start out in life, you build a network of friends and associations. And as you grow in yourself, sometimes those people that at that time were appropriate for your network, I'd listened to quite a few podcasts by Darren Hardy, for example, where it said that if there are people that in your network that actually perhaps could drag you down in some way, that aren't supportive, aren't proactive, don't perhaps support you in your own growth, that perhaps sometimes you've got to be tough and say, well, this person actually is not contributing to where I want to get to. And therefore, sometimes you may have to disassociate yourself with those kind of people. They might have been fine 10 years ago, but now actually the way they're behaving, what they're doing, what they're speaking about actually doesn't follow your own values, beliefs, and integrity. So sometimes, do you think it's important that you review the people that are around you? And, it's tough as it may be, if they're not the right people to take you to the next level, then perhaps you shouldn't mingle with them perhaps so much, or even disconnect from those people.
It's hard to, by the way, it's a very generic. I understand the concept of the question and the way you're wording it. It's generic enough that I don't want to universally say yes, and at the same time, I want to say yes. Right. So there are a number of things that people say that really are true. Your network is your net worth. Right. So that's one thing. We've often heard that you personally are a composite of the top of the 5 most common people you hang out with.
Yeah.
So if you hang out with people who, when you have an idea, they shoot you down, the naysayers of the world.
Yep.
If you want to do a lot in life and you have people around you telling you that you can't, that's going to stop you by definition. It's not a good thing. It's for those people, for instance, who good examples of those people who are alcoholics or end up getting addicted to drugs. If after you get the program and you understand how you should live life differently, if you go back into the environment that caused potentially the problem in the first place, and those people around you who want you to drink or take drugs, it's going to be hard for you to not. So that's a very classic example of where, yes, it makes sense to get rid of the network. Family members you can't get rid of. You just, for instance, if you disagree on politics, you just make a conscious decision not to talk about politics. The ability for you as a human to take a look at those around you, and to have, women are much better at keeping long-term friends than guys are.
Definitely,
I know
yeah.
that's a generic statement and that's hard to hear, but for those that are around you that you just enjoy being with, and also are good humans, right? So because you personally have a CPOP, right? So the playground you personally play in, do you have people that are in the playground that are supportive to you? And for me, by the way, having pivoted and done so many jobs, there are times where my wife, when somebody says, "What does your husband do?" She'll go, "Oh, publisher." Well, okay, that's one of many things, but it's easy, right? And the thing is, if you have people around you who, on the other hand, if I go to her with almost any statement, I go, "Hey, can I do this? Or do you think it makes sense to do this?" There'll be a 1 or 2 caveats, but the answer is always yes, right? And so you want to have around you the types of people who encourage you to be the best person you can be. And so I'm going to say, Dave, if you have people in your network who are not stopping you, or who are actually stopping you, who are not encouraging you to be the best person you could be, those are people you want to actually to move out of your influence zone, right? But I wouldn't put people in your network just because they can open up doors. I'd put people in your network because they're the right people for you as a human, and you both can grow and both enjoy each other's company and grow together. But when it comes to the point where it's either toxic or there is no more growth, or there's no more growth is probably okay. But if there's negative growth, if it doesn't feel good anymore, those are the harder relationships, long-term relationships where there's no more future growth together. And it's even stopping. People are trying to pull back. This is where a lot of marriages fail, is because we as humans continually evolve. But if one person stays the same and the other evolves, and the person who stays the same wants the other person to stay the same, right? That's where things fail. It's okay for one person to stay the same as long as they're not trying to pull the other person back to where they were before.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, that's brilliant. Now, one thing I recognize with yourself, with so many attributes, you're a very seasoned speaker and interviewer. Now, I'd love to understand how you prepare for those other speaking engagements or interviewing engagements to ensure you deliver the kind of maximum value and enhance in the process your credibility with both new and existing audiences. How do you go about that? How do you make sure you give the best value for those people you're going to meet?
Well, I'm going to say I do what you do, right? So just for those listening or watching, we had a call ahead of time where we talked about, hey, am I a good fit? And the first question I asked is so Dave, if I happen to be a guest that you enjoyed interacting with, that was good value to your audience, what would be the end result? What would you feel comfortable with? And then you told me, here's your format, here's the structure, here's what you want to make sure gets accomplished. Your short answer is, Mitchell, just be you. But it's be you where you actually give what are some real pivot points in your life? What are some transition points? What did you learn? So for me, the short answer, actually, I don't think, for some odd reason, I don't have any short answers for this interview. So thank you for letting me talk a little bit longer, is every situation I go into, I want to know what the end result is before I start, right? And that's, it's one of the things, Dave, we'll make sure we put this in a chat. There's a website where a place where I have a bunch of 5 to 20-minute courses. Many of them are complimentary. It's for those who are listening, and we put this in chat, aha.pub/superheroes. So aha.pub/superheroes. And one of the courses I'm going to recommend you take, I think it's 16 minutes. It's called the Input Output course. It is something I learned when I was in college, and it's something I've applied my entire life. And so the first thing I do, as a matter of fact, if you don't mind, we'll actually, do I have 2 or 3 minutes to go through this story?
Absolutely, yeah, please do.
All right. So listen, if you're listening and driving, don't do this. Just do it visually. But if you're at your desk, take out a piece of paper, old school, take out a piece of paper and actually put and draw a box in the middle of the piece of paper. And then have a line that goes into the left-hand side of the box. And then have a line that goes into outside of the right-hand side of the box. What I want you to do is label the box black box. And then the line that's going into the black box, label it as input. And the line that's going in the outside of the black box, label it output. So now that I've put that in place, we could talk an accelerated language. And that is, so you asked me, how do I prepare? Well, I want to make sure I know the inputs and outputs. The actual speaking itself is the black box. And until I know the inputs and outputs, so if it's an event and I'm speaking, well, who are the other speakers? What's going to happen before me or after me? If I'm first, what stage do you want me to send? If I'm last, what other people are going to talk about so I could potentially tie it together? And on the output, what is it that you want to achieve? I was a keynote speaker for a networking group that would physically get together 250 people. And I was the speaker that was brought in every December. I was brought in every December, and the guy never told me this, but it was pretty obvious to me, because with me as a speaker, it was a pretty good idea that the group would renew at the end of the year when they go into January, right? So that was always my idea, is let's do something unique enough that people would want to renew and see the next level, from January on. And so if you understand what your outputs are, and then you understand the input, that's when you can navigate the black box. What most humans do is they immediately jump into navigating the black box before understanding the inputs and outputs. So the only thing I do differently in every scenario. So if you said to me, hey, Mitchell, you got 30 seconds. I want you to accomplish this, whatever that is. I will, when I navigate the black box, I will set the output 30 seconds with this goal and then be able to do it. For us to be able to do this together, I've researched you, or researched the type of podcast you like, what you like to cover, what topics you like to cover. So I understood the inputs, you and I understood the outputs, and then we get to talk. And one of the questions I always ask when I'm doing a pre-interview is would you want me to answer TV style questions, 30, 40-second responses, or do you want radio responses? And you were like, oh, Mitchell, just tell me a story every time. Tell me a story. Give me radio responses. So that's why this is a little bit on the longer side. And because I understood the world that you want me to play in. And so then I could play in the world in a way that you would be happy.
Brilliant. That's a great response there. Now, I've got two more questions. The first one is about testimonials. We have personal testimonials, and there are testimonials to a business service or product or something like that. And that obviously can influence people, and it can influence businesses as well, about who they interact with and what they do, and what their perceptions of you are, how credible you are. So what would you say are some effective methods that you use to gather and perhaps showcase authentically the customer feedback that can help to elevate you or your business in a way that is really most productive? Is there any insights, any tips in that area?
So if I'm going to put it into a category, we'll just call that social proof.
Okay.
Right. And social proof is things that are as simple as, a lot of like buttons, or if you're doing, so funny when you go into a bathroom and you have 3 buttons. How was your experience? Good, bad, neutral, right? The thing that's interesting is every time you have an opportunity, and it depends on the business, so it's very generic, this response, but every time you have an opportunity to ask somebody, hey, how'd I do? Well, if you have the recording turned on, they could respond. So when I was doing the 500 interviews, after the interview was done, I'd say, hey, would you mind if you would give me a video testimonial? And they're like, oh, of course not. Right. And so that would be, and then what do you do with those video testimonials? Right. And how do you move them forward? Right. And that's the thing that's important is when you've provided value for somebody at that point in time, turn on the camera, whether it's just a recording device or just a camera, and just say, okay, how did this affect you? And if you know your CPOP, right? So what you want to do is if there's a pain point or pleasure point, if it's a pleasure, how did this help you reach the pleasure point? Or how did this address your pain point? And so then you then put onto your website, your social media. I'm a big LinkedIn fan. And so that's the primary place I say. So on the job categories, there will be lots of video testimonials. On the featured video could be a compilation of social proof. And I learn when I want to evaluate a product or service, I'm going to learn as much from what other people say as from the websites itself, because I want to get a feeling of what was the experience of those people who were clients to you previously. And so whatever it takes for you to be able to keep track of that in your mind and at the right time. And once again, it's the most like, so by the way, if you want, at the end of the interview, and you turn off and we say goodbye, Mitchell, how was it being a guest on my show? I'm happy. And by the way, what I'm going to do is, Dave, I'm going to say, what's the output? Do you want long? Do you want short? Are there a couple key points you want me to emphasize? And the answer would be, by the way, if I'm going to do it right now live, being on Dave Barr's show is so powerful because he's going to talk to you ahead of time, do a pre-interview, research on you, and bring up the types of points that are relevant so that you can be you, so that you're adding value to his audience. I have so enjoyed this experience, right? So, by the way, feel free to clip that and use that. And we've been taught, if you are part of the National Speakers Association, you've been taught to make it about you. Here's my name, here's my title, here's how cool I am, and let me tell you about my friend Dave Barr. And that seems silly to me. To me, this is for Dave Barr. This is for Dave's future customers, whether the customer is on the podcast or something else. The most important thing I see is a person who cares, who does the research, shows me the respect ahead of time, credible value, gives me the time. You even gave me the opportunity, because there was some personal stuff going on, to reschedule. And I said, no, I could fit this in. You were just you, right? You were the type of person that I want to hang around with. I may want to do business with, and you just show me you. And that's what, to me, adds a lot of value. And so if somebody wanted to do business with you, I'm hoping that testimonial is something you're interested in. And if you want something else, tell me a different output, and I'll give you a different testimonial.
That's very kind, Mitchell. I really do appreciate what you said. It's very unexpected and very, 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 very welcome. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Let's jump on to a particular area that I'm sure people now are really keen to hear about, and that's more about you, what you do, what you've published. Could you share very briefly the best places where people would go? I think LinkedIn could well be one of them, by the sound of things, the best places people go to find out more about you and your content and what you do. And then could you share a minute or two about Credibility Nation? I see that you've got a publication behind you there. Can you tell people about that? I think that's important for people to hear.
No, thank you. The best place nowadays, and this is always, we're all always evolving, is my personal website. So it's mitchelllevy.com. And so it's mitchelllevy.com. And there you get the opportunity to, whatever is hot in my mind, whatever I'm working on now is what I'll feature. It'll be links to LinkedIn if you want to connect to me on LinkedIn and what have you. If you decide this was relevant enough and you want to book time on my calendar, you can get directly to my calendar from mitchelllevy.com. And actually I've got two different groups that I'm working with. It's the Inc. 5000 CEOs. That's more of an executive coaching, executive gravitas experience. And the other group are business owners, because I'm one myself. And since I found solutions and I am doing throughout the year, I'm doing webinars on getting referrals, right? Because most of the time we're not getting the referrals that we really need. Even those around us are not getting the referrals we need. So I'm doing how do you effectively, the seven habits of using LinkedIn effectively to guarantee that you'll continually get a good stream of referrals. And so that's a webinar that I'm doing throughout the year of 2025. That is powerful and interesting, and we'll see what happens in 2026.
Brilliant. Some interesting stuff coming up there. Credibility Nation. Is there anything you particularly want to say about that?
I could say at this stage, so it's the Credibility Nation is both a community that I have and a book called Credibility Nation. It is the byproduct of interviewing 500 thought leaders on credibility, and you could probably. I don't want to stop sales, but if you went to GPT, it probably knows most of, because a lot of the stuff in the book I've published online. So if you really wanted to sit down and read, it's got all the things that are relevant to how do you be credible. I need the next evolution of that book, so the next phase. And the thing that's holding it back is I'm in the midst of getting a PhD. And so the coursework is done. And the dissertation of what's next. And so the next book will be part of my dissertation. And so that's the piece where I've actually been applying the concepts of clarity and credibility for the last 4.5 years. And I've learned so many incredible lessons that I'm looking forward to and continue to enjoy structuring it and putting it into book format. But it's when that it's for me, that's what I'm looking forward to next, is saying, hey, here's all the research, here's all the practice, and now here's a roadmap.
Brilliant. That sounds really exciting. We look forward to hearing more about that as it comes up. So, seeing at the time now, one final question. I have the privilege of spending time with many small and medium-sized business owners. I'm in a little bit, not as vast as yourself, but I'm in various networking clubs, and I talk to a lot of business owners that are experiencing some tough times, shall we say, out there. And I'd love to be able to give them insights from my guests as to what nuggets of gold would they say to them to help them. And in this particular case, obviously, it's about credibility. For those small to medium-sized business owners, those people who are having a tough time, what would be the key things you would say that would help them and their business become more credible to their customers? I know it's a tough ask, but if you've got 3 or 4 things you could share, that'd be really useful.
So, one, come up with your CPOP, your customer point of possibilities. In less than 10 words, have clarity about who you serve and the pain point or pleasure point that they represent. And I'm going to say that that's 1A. 1B is make sure that when you talk in person, and also when people go to your website and your social media, you're consistent, right? And most people aren't. I mean, just to be clear, most people aren't. They're like all over the place, right? And second is, as you mentioned, social proof. So to be able to have video testimonials on your website, in your social, that reinforce that, and I'll put in 3. If you don't have any video testimonials today, and you don't have clients or past clients, you could ask for video testimonials. I'll make 3 is do something I love doing. I call it the 3 for 3 program. This is more appropriate for coaches and consultants. And that particular program is offer to work with somebody for $1 a month for 3 months. Okay. The cost is what you talk to the person is, listen, at somewhere between month 2 or 3, I want to get a video testimonial. And if you like the experience, I'd like you to recommend me to 3 others. Right. And so now if you're sitting there and you're a coach and you're doing something new, or a consultant and you're doing something new, well, you need social proof. Well, go out and get social proof. And you do need to charge at least $1 a month. It has to be some financial transaction happens. But what you're really doing at the end of somewhere between 3 to 6 months or 3 to 9 months is you've had the opportunity to potentially work with up to 12 people. You know, the 3 recommendations that you get from all 3 people, you could charge half price, you could charge full price, you could still go at the dollar if you want to. But what you've now been able to do is really practice and fine tune your craft and have social proof showing that you're good at what you do. And by the way, at the end of the 3-month period, you then have a conversation with a person. Was this worthwhile? This is my normal rates. Is there a rate that you'd rather have? Right? It's an opportunity for you to grow into that business, and it's one in which they get to see you, feel you, experience you, and you have fun, they have fun, and it's a really good way for coaches and consultants to move along.
Fabulous. Well, thanks very much for your time today. Those nuggets of gold, I'm sure, will be extremely useful to my audience. I do appreciate that. And it's been a pleasure to interview you today. I really do appreciate your time.
Dave, thank you. It's been an honor. I love somebody who prepares, who knows their audience, and keeps me on track, because it's kind of easy to go all over the place. So thank you. I really appreciate you.
Brilliant. Take care. Speak to you soon.
Take care, everyone.
So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it, and it has given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and a 5-star review would be most appreciated. If you would like to discover more about me and what I do, take a look at www.thereallifebuyer.co.uk. Bye.